Today I'm going to look at how you might build a little bit larger Faraday cage. So what I've done is I've got a couple different supplies here. I've got some wooden structure that goes together as a box. This one is 2 foot by 2 foot. It's going to be a 2 foot cube. But there are different sizes of this, and this will give the structure to the Faraday cage. So it's really nice that it'll be nice and rigid and firm. It can hold things without collapsing in on itself. Something that can be stored away and has some structure to it. And then in terms of the conductive barrier, I've got some really neat, it's kind of like a radiant barrier type material, but it's really highly conductive. It's nice and thick, very hard to tear or to poke a hole in. And then I've got some good quality conductive tape as well. So what I'll do is I'll show you how this wooden box goes together first, and then we'll talk about how we would put on this conductive barrier to create a Faraday cage. All right, so the wooden box comes as 4 pieces. There's a top, which is just sort of a lid, if you will. And there's a bottom, which is identical to the top. All right, so one will go on the top, one will go on the bottom. And then there's 2 sets of sides, and they're basically 2 pieces that just fold out. They have a hinge in the middle. You can tell it's quite large. They're going to fold out and form the sides of the Faraday cage. And they all have these locking tabs that are going to allow the top to go on and the bottom to go on, and then these tabs will fold over to hold them in place. Now for the top, we're going to leave it where the top can be removed. There's really not a necessity to do that for the bottom. I can't think of a case when you'd want to take the bottom off, but we're going to make it at least where the top is easy to remove, all right? So we'll build this up. I'll talk to you about the method I'm going to use to build it, and then at the very end we'll test it to see how effective it is. All right, so to build up the 4 walls, what we're going to do is we're going to take these 2 pieces here. One of them is going to be like a left and a front, and then one of them would be like a right and a back. So they're going to go together like so, all right? And they have little interlocking tabs that help them fit together and have some structure to it. And I'll zoom in and show that at one point here, all right? Go ahead and get this thing just sort of generally put together. There's going to be 2 on this where these join, and then 2 on this other side where these join. So I'll zoom in so you can see how these are. All right, let me go ahead and zoom in the camera. All right, so the way they work is one side has these little fins that poke out, and the other side just has some spots for them to fit through. And you just kind of line them up and push them together. And then if you can certainly bend these over so that they lay flat and hold the structure. Now the trick is going to be to apply this conductive barrier, and you really have 2 choices. You can either put it on the inside of the box, which would be fine, or you can put it on the outside. In either case, the barrier needs to wrap up and around each of the faces so that you don't end up with any long, narrow gaps that don't have a conductive seal to them. All right, so I'm going to choose to put the barrier on the outside of the box, and I'm going to do that primarily because I want the inside of the box to be non-conductive. I want to be able to put items in this big Faraday cage and not worry about them shorting up against the sidewall, which would be conductive if I put the barrier in there. So I'm going to leave it wood inside, and I'm going to put the barrier on the outside. Again, I'll wrap them around a little bit so they'll be like an inch or so folded all the way around inside so that all the edges will end up with conductive barrier on top of them. All right? So first I'm going to go ahead and just structurally put the box together nice and tight. And all that means is I'm going to put all these things in and fold them flat so that this box will hold together. And then I'm going to take my pre-cut barrier. I cut this barrier so that it's larger than each face. It's a little bit bigger than 2 foot on a side. And then I'm going to work face by face, basically applying it to each face. All right, and I have a total of 6 pieces of the conductive barrier there. So I'll put 4 around the sides. I'll use 1 for the top, and then I'll use 1 for the bottom. All right, and I'll show you how that comes out as I start applying it. Let me go ahead and zoom in one more time so you can see how I seal up these latch mechanisms. All I used was a pair of pliers and a hammer to get them sort of lined up and then folded over and pounded flat. Let me go ahead and zoom in. I'll do the last one here so you can see it. All right, so I've done the other side, and I've only partially done this side. So what I've got here is this one at the bottom I've already folded over and pounded flat, but this one here I've just folded over. I just used a pair of pliers to do that. And then I'll take a hammer and I'll pound it flat so that it all stays together and I don't have to worry about coming apart. Make sure all that's nice and flat. And you end up with a nice structural strong seal between these different sides, all right? So all the way around, it's nice and strong. It's not going to collapse on itself. And then what we do to give it even more structure is we're going to put the bottom on it, and once we line up all the tabs with the bottom, it'll really hold its shape nicely. So with those 4 tabs folded over and then hammered down, the thing has pretty good structural integrity now. It's holding together. It's not going to collapse on itself, certainly. And what will give it even more structural integrity is to take the bottom and get the bottom attached. When we do that, the whole thing will hold together really nice and rigid. Again, we're going to leave the top where we can remove it. Okay, so it's going to be done as its own separate piece. But what we'll do next is we'll go ahead and put the bottom on, and that whole part's going to be sealed up with this radiant barrier. All right, so that'll be our next step. All right, so to get the bottom on, we just have to line up these 8 tabs. There's 2 on each side. We just have to kind of feed them through these little slots here by getting it all nice and square. All right, so I'll just go ahead and line these up. And if some of the tabs are bent, you may have to take a pair of pliers to get them to slide down in the slots. In this case, there were a couple of them a little bit bent, but not enough, I think, that I'll have to bend them out. There we go. So you end up with 2 of these notch parts popped up through on each side, so a total of 8. So again, since we're not worried about the bottom being removable, I'm going to go ahead and bend each of those over with pliers, tap them down, and then what we're going to do when we wrap it with this with this conductive material, we'll make sure that's all sealed up nice and tight. We don't want to have any seams or gaps, all right? So we'll eliminate the one at the bottom entirely, and the only thing we'll have to worry about is the top, and I'll show you how to handle that when we get to it. All right, so we go on ahead and put on the bottom, and again, I just tap down all of those little latches that come through here. So the box now is pretty structurally tight. The top will go on in the same way, but before I put the top on, I want to wrap both the top with this conductive material and each of the faces, all right? So I have 6 pieces of conductive material, 1 for the top, 1 for each of the sides, and 1 for the bottom, all right? I'm going to start by doing the bottom first, all right? And then I'm going to do the sides, and then I'll do the top last. All right, so as I get ready to do the bottom, I flip the box upside down, and I'm going to apply one of these conductive barriers to the bottommost surface first, okay? And again, you don't have to do it in this order, but it's just the order I'm going in. It doesn't matter which side of the conductive barrier you use. You can flip it one way or the other. Both sides are conductive. And again, it's a really durable material. I really like it. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to apply this to the bottom. Now, I don't have to worry about those little latches poking up through it because it's going to wrap all the way around. We're not going to have the bottom removable. So all I really have to do is kind of just wrap it like I would a present and just get nice tight edges, you know, with my box here. And then I'll use my conductive tape to get a nice conductive seal all the way around. Okay, so you just kind of center this material, form little corners, fold them over just like you're making a bed or wrapping up a present here, and you get a nice clean seal when you get done. Okay, go ahead and do this so you can see. Just kind of fold it back like this, and the material's nice because it holds its shape pretty well. So it's not difficult to work with, like let's say maybe aluminum foil might be a little more difficult. So you get it set over like that, and then what I'm going to do is just take this conductive tape, and I'm going to tape around the outside just across this layer here just to hold that down, and then we have a really great seal across that gap where the top came to the wall. So it'll be a really good RF seal. All right, so go ahead and tape that up, and then after we do that, we'll do each of the sides. So to apply the tape, I've just cut off a section of it. I'm going to do one side at a time. Now, if you're really good with this sort of thing, you could probably do one continuous piece of tape all the way around, but I would probably mess that up. So I'm just going to do one side at a time. And this tape is really a neat tape. It's conductive, but it has sort of a, almost like a fibrous feel to it. It's very durable, much more durable than, let's say, just regular aluminum duct tape. So I'm just going to fold it over there. I'm going to try and get it straight as I come across here, and just try and get a seal on this that I'm happy with. Let's see if I can do that. All right, go ahead and pop this side up just a hair here. There we go. All right. So I just want to make sure I've got that side all the way taped down, okay? Doesn't have to be perfectly beautiful. I got a little crease right here, but that's not going to make any difference at all. The only thing that really matters is right here along the edge of where that foil comes down, where that barrier comes down. We want to make sure that is completely covered a little bit in both directions, okay? So now keep in mind one other thing as you apply this layer of tape. It's going to be completely covered because we're going to put the side barrier on over this, okay? And so you'll never see this. This is just an internal layer of tape. So what I'll do is I'll apply one layer of tape on each of the sides here to hold this down, and then I'll work on the sides. Okay, so with the bottom done, we have to work on the sides. And the way I'm going to do it is I tilted the box onto one of its sides. I've laid one of the pieces of the barrier over it, centered it up. And then what I'm going to do to handle these latches is I'm going to cut a small notch. I'm going to line up this barrier centered, and I'm going to feel of where those latches are at. And I'm going to cut two small slots here for them to fit through. So it'll slide down like that. Okay, hopefully you can see that. I'll zoom in so you can see it. But that'll give you a nice clean edge here. Go ahead and zoom in. So again, all I did is I centered the barrier on one of the sides here, and I lined up the barrier, and I felt where the latch was, and I cut a slot, maybe about 2 inches or so, and then you can just slide the barrier back and it fits right over those, okay? And that lets me have a nice clean fold. I don't have to try and do it after I've taped it, all right? So I'll go ahead and tuck these in here so that I have this nice and flat, and that's what I'd like, okay? So put those two notches, feed them through, get this folded in a little bit so that everything's flat. And then you can work your way around the side, just like we did before. Okay, so I've placed 3 of the sides on and taped them down. I've just laid the 4th side on. I cut the notches through it, I slid it back, and I've smoothed it all down, but I haven't taped it yet. And I wanted to show you one small thing you can run into. When you're getting ready to fold this down inside, you'll see that sometimes it might interfere with one of the other latches. So for like here, if I tried to fold it down, you'll see some interference here. And that's okay. It's not a big deal. All you have to do is cut that area of the barrier out, because again, we're going to have a whole nother side there. We're not relying on this piece. We have a whole nother barrier there, okay? So we're going to just cut out that might interfere, and that will let us get a nice clean fold. Okay, so anything that you're folding down in, if it starts interfering with one of the latches, you can just cut it out as you fold it in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tape it up. So once I fold in these lips here, and you may have to make little notches in some of the corners to get it to lay flat, you're going to just cut some tape and you're going to tape it down, all right? So you're going to just come in here, pull it down nice and tight, and try and get it to lay down for you, all right? Now, this tape's pretty durable. It lets you pull it off and reuse it as long as you're careful with it. I like how it's pretty easy to work with. So you can tape it down like that. And then we can come back at the end. Once we get all of it taped down, we'll pay attention to these corners. Again, we might put a little cut and then a little piece of tape just to hold that down nice and flat. It's a little hard to get one piece all the way around. I tried that and it's a little difficult. So we'll just put a strip across the middle. We'll come back and take care of the corners last. Okay, so once you get the bottom done and the sides done, you want to go ahead and take care of the lid here. So what we'll do is we'll center the lid on our last piece of this protective barrier here. And what we're going to do is really just fold this up and around and form a lip. We want it to be nice and tight, so we have to fold it back when we do this. So when we fold it here, we have to get a nice sharp edge, okay? So you want to create a nice sharp edge here. Just maybe start at one side, because we're going to have to cut small slots in the very top of it for the latches to come through, okay? So we're going to go ahead and just create that nice sharp edge along one side. And we get to the other side here, we have to handle this extra material. Now we can cut this away so that we don't have as much to deal with. So you can just take it like so and cut that away so not quite as much to handle there. And then this part's going to come in also very tight, all right? All right, now we get to these corners, we're going to have material here that we're not going to want. It's going to be more than what we want, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that away where we can get it to lay flat, all right? We don't want to have a lot of this. Now, if you don't have too much, you can get it to lay flat in here. That would work fine. But if you end up with too much and it starts interfering with the thing closing, you'll need to come in and cut that little bit extra out, all right? Now, I don't like having a lot extra there, so I'm going to go ahead and cut some of this out, like so. All right, just to make sure I don't have a lump or anything around the lid. All right, so you want to get that nice and tight in these corners, right? Okay, so I've got the lid all done here. I've taped around the inside. Again, you have to just pay attention to these corners here. There's no magic to it. You know, maybe if your spouse is a great Christmas wrapper, they can show you the exact cut to get that to lay down flat. I just removed any extra that was needed to get these to lay down. Again, because we want this lid to sit on top of the box as flat as possible. So nice crisp edge and flat all the way around where it's going to be laying is what you need. Now the other thing you need to do is you need to cut slots for where the latches are going to poke up through. All right, now that's actually pretty easy to do. If you feel along the edge of these, I did this already, you can, the edges, the gaps just show up, all right? They're very easy to feel if you just smooth along the edge. You can tell what's wood and then you come across a gap. And then you just take your X-Acto and you cut in that slot, right? That creates the little gap there. And you can do that for all four sides, okay? So it's very easy to go around and just feel until you find that slot. It'll just show up. And then you take your X-Acto and you cut that slot. Again here. Get a nice cut there. And just do that for all four sides, all right? Again, you can just feel it. Once you do it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And that will cut the slots from the top. Now, if you look though, from the underside, where I had cut those slots, they aren't cut all the way through, and it's because we have a layer on top and a layer underneath. So we have to cut two places. So this is a little bit trickier, but I have to find those cuts, and then I have to go from this side, and I have to cut through those holes, all right? And you'll find the holes once you feel around there. So again, I find where I cut it before, then I just use the edge of the X-Acto to cut the hole, all right? Now I start from the top because it's just much easier to see it from the top. And then once you get that cut, it's very easy to find it from the underside, all right? Again, you cut them. So like on this one, I can't see any cut through, so I find where it is, just poke the X-Acto knife up through the hole here and make that slice, all right? And then our final side here, we slice it, and we slice it. And that gives me cuts all the way through, oh, I forgot one side here. That all the way through the both layers of it, okay? So again, just have to find it from the other side, poke the X-Acto knife through to get it cut in the same spot. Okay, so I've got the lid on. You know, I'll admit it took me a couple of minutes to get it to sit properly. I had to be patient with it to get all four tabs aligned, all 8 tabs rather, aligned and perfectly seated. You have to kind of push on the box to make sure it's square enough if things are off. But it can be done. All of them are, as you can see, they're all through the slots. And sometimes you'll get a little bit of interference from the protective material as you push through it. You'll have to just kind of work that around right there. You know, again, you can just kind of work it so that each of them, and then give each corner a good tap so that they're fully seated. I noticed one time I had one corner that wasn't fully down. All right, now, if you have worries about, you know, maybe you feel like, oh, I've got too much of a gap here. I don't actually think that's going to be any issue at all. Again, remember we've wrapped the material up underneath it as well. But if you did have concerns over that, you certainly could take some tape and tape around this area or something like that, okay? It's usually, remember, it's usually the long, narrow seams that let in the energy, not the small holes. So I think this is all put together. As you can tell, it's a good-sized Faraday cage, and it's very durable. You know, you could carry it somewhere. It's a product that I haven't seen before. You know, you can find a lot of EMP bags, and you can use galvanized garbage cans. there's, the shape of the garbage can be a little bit limiting sometimes. So this is nice. You could get different size boxes. This is a 2-foot cube, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually quite a lot. It's quite a lot of space to store things in. The interior of it is wood, so you don't have to worry about lining it or anything like that. Now you certainly could line it with cardboard if you want to, but you really don't need to, which is why I left the wood in there. All right. So this is the 2x2 sort of homemade Faraday Cage Kit. Again, there could be different sizes. You could buy a 3x3 box if you wanted something even bigger or some other shape. We use this really durable conductive barrier, which is just really nice. It's just a really nice material, you can tell. And we used also some high quality tape, some high quality conductive tape to seal up the different seams as they came around. Okay, you don't see a lot of seams on the outside because really it's just where the sides sort of got taped down. It's the only place you see it. We taped up the bottom to limit our leak path. Basically what we did is we didn't use on the bottom, we put a whole cover on there, and then as we folded the sides over, we taped those down, so you end up with a tape pattern like that on the bottom. But the bottom's not going to leak any energy at all because it's all sealed up. The top is your only risk, really. And the way we've done it with the overlapping layers and all that, I think it's going to do very well. But we don't know until we test it. And so what we'll do next is we'll do some testing to see how well it performs. All right, I want to show you a couple other small things you can do just to kind of shore up the box a little bit. And it has to do with these small flanges that poke through the top of the box. So what you can do is you can cut a couple of small pieces of this conductive tape and use it to essentially kind of seal up around that hinge a little bit. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so you can see exactly how to do that. All right, so you're going to cut 2 pieces of the tape. One of them you're going to cut a slot about an inch or 2 wide right in the center of the piece of tape, and that's going to go over this flange right here. And then the second piece you're going to cut an identical slot, but it's going to be offset to one side a little bit, and that's going to go on the lid, and I'll show you that in just a second. So first thing we do is we're going to put this piece on this little flange that pokes up that would go up into the lid, all right? And it'll just help seal up around this hole a little bit. All right, we'll peel the tape off. And it's, again, the slot's right in the hole, right in the center, so we're going to just fit it over that, push it down, and then just smooth it down on the front of the box, fold it over, and smooth it inside the box. And that gives it a little sort of structure around this little tab, and it also helps seal up the hole that's created when we had to cut the original hole in this protective material, right? So that does it for the tab. You do that for all 8 of the tabs. You just cut a little piece like that of the tape, and it helps seal that up. And then the other thing you do is you do something very similar for the lid. So I'm going to put the lid on next, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so I've got the lid back on, and the second piece of tape, the slot is not cut in the center of the tape, but rather it's offset a little bit. And that's going to enable me to put it over and it just connect to the lid and not drape down onto the main body of the box, okay? So again, I'll just go ahead and peel the tape off and we'll apply that over here. Just fit it over the little tab there, smooth it out, and fold it over. All right? And again, that just helps a little bit to seal up the hole that's made when you had to cut through the barrier to, where you can remove this lid. So it's just another way to add a little bit of protection to seal up holes and give it a little bit of structure around this point. And again, you do that to all 8 of the tabs that poke up through the lid. Okay, so the lid would have 8 of these little strips on it to just sort of shore up that area where the tab pokes up through. Okay, so to determine the shielding effectiveness of our Faraday box, what we're going to do is first take an open air measurement. That is the spectrum analyzer just sitting on the floor in the open air. We'll generate an RF wave with our signal generator, our amplifier, and our broadband antenna, and we'll measure its level right there in the open air. And then we'll repeat the experiment with the spectrum analyzer placed inside of our Faraday box, and by comparing the 2 values we can tell what shielding the box provides for that particular frequency that we're testing at. So I've got everything set up for 100 megahertz, so my signal generator is set to 100 megahertz. transmitting at minus 10 dBm. It goes through the amplifier and then goes through this broadband antenna. So I'm going to zoom in here so we can see the signal. I'll go ahead and turn on the generator and you'll see a signal pop up right in about the middle of the screen there. Right, you see that pop up. Now I can actually turn back off the signal because I've got the signal generator or the spectrum analyzer to capture the peak value. All right, and the peak value looks like about minus 7 dBm. Okay, so our open air measurement will be minus 7 dBm. Now we'll just repeat that experiment with the spectrum analyzer put inside the box. So I've placed the spectrum analyzer inside the box. I'm going to go ahead and turn back on the signal. Now I can turn it back off and then we can open up the box and we can see what the peak level was. I'll zoom in here and show you. It's right at the noise floor. Maybe there's a tiny little bump there out of the noise. It's kind of hard to tell. That level is minus 73 dBm. So what we can say is that the box provided at least 67 dB of shielding at the frequency of 100 megahertz, okay, which is really fantastic. 60 dB is 99.9% of the field reduced, and we're at 67 dB, which is even better than that. So excellent shielding at 100 megahertz, which is what I wanted to show, that these boxes, if sealed up properly, can really provide very high levels of shielding and great EMP protection.